All right, so we've talked about the buyer side with consumer surplus and producer side with producer surplus. Now we can bring them together to talk about total surplus. So total surplus is going to be, I'll put an arrow there so it doesn't look like a minus sign. So total surplus equals consumer surplus plus producer surplus. So think of it as kind of the overall value created for society from the exchange of goods in this market. Goods or services in this market. So it's kind of measuring, the total value created for society as a whole through the exchange of goods and services in this particular market. And in voluntary, with voluntary trade, consumers will buy until the price equals their willingness to pay. So WTP for willingness to pay. And producers or sellers will sell until the price equals their willingness to sell, WTS for willingness to sell. And finally, when we talk about efficiency in this market, we're going to think about efficiency being when this total surplus in this market is maximized. And this is when we can start thinking about, how strong and how powerful markets are. If they have these assumptions we've been making, then just letting the market on its own, just go on its own, we can't reorganize that in any way to improve the total surplus. So if these assumptions hold, we'll draw it out, we'll talk about it. But if these assumptions of competitive markets hold, then markets by themselves, without government intervention, are going to maximize the total surplus. So that's why economists think that markets are so powerful. The issue is that most markets don't have these competitive market assumptions. They don't have those hold. Okay, so let's think about what this looks like graphically, just with our normal supply and demand curve with no government intervention. So we've seen consumer surplus and producer surplus individually. We just learned that total surplus is these two things added together. So let's think about what total surplus looks like graphically. So total surplus graphically. So we'll say equals consumer surplus plus producer surplus. We have price and quantity, we have our upward sloping supply curve, our downward sloping demand curve. Quantity supplied equals quantity demanded is our equilibrium. You go down to figure out equilibrium quantity, we go over to figure out equilibrium price. And remember, producer surplus that we just covered is below price above the supply curve. And consumer surplus below demand curve above the price. And so producer surplus is this area here, below the price, above the supply curve. And consumer surplus is this area here, below the demand curve, above the price. But we only get this surplus, remember, for the number of units we sell. So there's nothing over here right now because we only sell Q star. And people are going to be willing to buy up until, they're going to be willing to buy up until the price equals their willingness to pay. And people are going to be willing to sell until the price equals their willingness to sell. So just at this equilibrium point here. And so total surplus is this entire shaded in area. So consumer surplus plus producer surplus. And efficiency is when total surplus is maximized. So here, Q star is the allocatively efficient level of quantity, or the allocatively efficient quantity, maybe I should just say allocatively efficient quantity. So this is the quantity that gets exchanged on the market that maximizes total surplus. So this is what makes, markets so powerful. If we have these assumptions hold, many buyers, many sellers, homogeneous goods, then just left on its own devices, this market is going to be efficient. Just buyers and sellers themselves will organize such that we're going to get an efficient quantity and an efficient quantity is the key here. And so this is what makes markets so powerful. So Q star is going to be this allocatively efficient quantity because it maximizes total surplus. Now, anytime, with the assumptions we made about the market, anytime we get away from this kind of free market equilibrium, we're going to be reducing total surplus. So this is when it's maximized. That means anytime we kind of leave this quantity, this Q star here, so we saw that would happen with either taxes or government intervention, we're going to see a decrease in efficiency. And we're going to call this loss of efficiency deadweight loss. But we'll come back to that in a few minutes. Okay, so this is what total surplus looks like graphically. And then this is the idea that free markets, when these competitive market assumptions hold, are going to be allocatively efficient. We get the efficient quantity in the markets without government intervention. And so this is where that famous Adam Smith quote comes, like, it's not the benevolence of the butcher, the bread maker, blah, 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 blah. That it's not people just looking out for each other and doing this kind of thing that leads to an efficient outcome. It's that everyone's kind of acting in their own self-interest. They're trying to make the most money they can. They're trying to get, the best deal they can. It's through that we get this efficient outcome that maximizes efficiency for society as a whole. We don't need to reorganize people or anything like that to get this efficient outcome. Markets will do that naturally, automatically, and that's what's so powerful about them. But only if these crazy competitive market assumptions hold.